I'm Anna Perceval, and I'm on the Brady Photographic Archive Committee. I work on the archive team, and I'm a trustee of the Bradians Trust. My parents met at Brady Club when they were in their early teens, and so Brady has always been a fact of life in my family. And when I was 11 or 12, we started going to skeet on a regular basis. Every year, Whitsun weekend, a group of old Brady families would get together and hire out Skeet Hill House for a weekend. So we'd have a long weekend in the country. And altogether there'd be about 40 of us. The kids would often bring a friend from school, so the faces changed every year, but there was always a core small group of families. And our parents would run the weekend the way Skeet was for them when they were kids. So there would be boys in one dormitory, girls in another, the men in a dormitory, the women in another one. And we would do night games, which I'll talk about. We would have games around the house. We'd do the kind of games that they had done as kids. We'd always do a big walk one day down to Orpington Castle, around the fields, and then back up via the pub, where the kids would sit outside with a lemonade and a bag of crisps, and the parents would go inside and have a refreshing beer. And all the food would obviously be catered the rest of the time by the staff at Skeet, so we'd have huge meals together in the dining room. At the time, there were football fields all the way across one side of the land, and there was the tennis courts. So there'd be loads of outdoor games. Sometimes we'd do a campfire. Night games outside in the dark were hilarious. We didn't have mobile phones, so we didn't necessarily have flashlights on us. And eventually, everyone would be found and brought back into the house. It might take a while, but nobody panicked. Nobody was going to get lost. Everyone would be on the property somewhere. We'd play a game called Round the House, where all the parents would set up a game in different rooms around the house, and the kids would be in teams and would be dashing around from one activity to the next. One of my favourites, there was a girls' bathroom on the first floor landing, and they would leave some cups and straws in there. There'd be a note on the wall saying, you can get the water out of the sink and get it down to the buckets downstairs under timed conditions. And of course, for a while, you'd have to chat and work out, well, what do they talk about? Do we get it in our hands? And eventually someone would say, oh, well, we've got these straws. And you would have to suck the water up into your straw, hold the end of it with your tongue so that the water wouldn't come out, run down the stairs, and then let the water come out of the straw into the cups downstairs to then fill up the buckets. You can imagine the mess, the water everywhere, the health and safety hazard. I'm not sure you'd be able to do that anymore. But those are the kind of things we'd do. Each parent would have their own responsibility for a different area. So some would be more like a challenge or a riddle that you had to work out before you could do the activity. Sometimes you'd be asked to guess how long a minute was. We'd all sit there and go, now. And that would take most of the day. And then we'd be preparing for a big dinner and a show. And the parents would usually have written a script that they would go off and rehearse, and they've had time to think in advance, so they've brought costumes. And they've probably all seen the script in reverse. I don't know how the parents did it. There'd be a huge show, usually written by Eric Levine, Lowell Koski, Leslie Rabin, Paul Brent. And these things would be hilarious. That we have some photos, we have no video of what happened, but we do have the scripts, which will be part of the Brady archive. And the kids would all go off to different rooms or to the barn and come up with a skit or a dance or something, and then we'd raid whatever we'd all brought for the weekend and make up some costumes out of whatever we could find. So the kids one was always a little bit more ad hoc. The parents, absolutely hilarious. So When we played night games, to be honest, it didn't really matter what the theme was, because the whole point was to run around in the dark and hopefully not get stuck in the brambles, but it happened. So it might be a murder mystery, it might be something hidden somewhere on the site that's, we'd go off in teams and try to find. Sometimes we would do, the kind of games where if the other team tap you on the shoulder, you're out, you're dead, whatever. And the team with the most number of survivors was the winner. Didn't really matter, did it? It was about running around outside, and at the end, there'd generally be some hot chocolate. In the dormitories in Skeet Hill House, there was one particular room that had a trap door above it that led up to another dormitory. And in the years when we were there, we didn't have bunk beds in the kids' rooms. We had, just single beds. So the kids downstairs couldn't reach the trapdoor, but the kids upstairs had the trapdoor. And I'm sure the parents must have known every trick in the book because they'd been there themselves. But of course, when the boys were upstairs and the girls were downstairs, we had issues with the trapdoor opening and a gravelly voice coming through the dark. And there was another room up in the loft where there was a tiny little door which took you into what looked like the eaves in the roof of the building. But actually, if you looked through the dark, there was another door on the other side which took you through to the bathroom of the next room. So you could sneak in the night, move some things around, scare some of the younger kids and blame it on Lady Cynthia. By the time the older Brady kids from those weekends were hitting their exam years, our weekends slowed down because we were old enough to want to go out with friends at the weekends, or because it was Whitsun weekend, we had exams coming up. And so that period of time really stopped for us. So by that age, 15, 16, I'd begun working in the local Jewish youth communities. And so I still went to Skeet on occasions with other groups, sometimes as a participant, sometimes as a leader, and nobody else ran the weekends the way we ran the weekends. They were all very regimented. But I went with Redbridge Jewish Youth Centre as a member, as a leader. And then I started working in the Jewish learning disability community. And we did try taking groups of kids there. Wasn't successful because it's not a wheelchair-friendly building. And at the time, there were no ground floor bedrooms, although that's been built on since. So that didn't really work out, but we used it for training for staff for our summer schemes. And I brought with me some of the things that we did as the Brady crowd into our training sessions. So, for example, I'd run a session where two people would sit back to back with some paper and pens. One person would draw something and then explain to the other person what they'd drawn, and they would try and replicate it. And that was the kind of activity that we would have done as kids at Brady for fun. But actually, as a training tool, it's a really nice way of getting people to think about how the way you speak and explain something needs to be precise enough for somebody else to follow what you're saying. So when you are working as a youth leader or with people with learning disabilities, you really need to be able to express yourself well and in a way that someone else would understand. So that was a really nice training experience that we would have there. We also would learn Makaton, which is a learning disability friendly sign language. So we'd do a Makaton training weekend at Skeet and then try and negotiate doing all of the Skeet activities in sign language, which is another really interesting way of using the building. But something else that we did with the old Bradians, with our parents, was go down to Skeet and do manual labour. We would clear nettle patches when some building work needed to happen. We would trim the brambles hanging over the tennis courts to maintain the place. So as well as using Skeet as a place of relaxation and fun, we also had a feeling that we had a responsibility for maintaining it and looking after it. And then in adult life, I've come back to it as a trustee of the Old Bradians Trust. And we do feel that we no longer have that relationship with Skeet, but there is still a sense that we have a responsibility to look after the history of Brady and to maintain it and preserve it for future generations. Skeet weekends were a really important way of giving the children freedoms to just be kids, to run around outside, to make your own fun, to not sit in front of the TV. And of course, we didn't have mobile phones back then, but there were no TVs at Skeet. You made your own fun. You know, went and found a ball and got on with it. The grounds at Skeet were big enough that the kids could go off, feel like they were not under the watchful eye of a parent, and feel like they were having a bit of mischief. Well, I suppose the parents knew that the kids really couldn't get into too much trouble on the site. And for us, because we had done it for so many years, we'd been to Skeet before for open days, you know, we were used to it. There was this nice sense of leaving London and being in the country. You know, we were 40 minutes away from home, but it didn't feel like that. And I once, in my 20s, took a group of youth leaders that I was training for a scheme in Hackney, and I took them down to Skeet and ran a leadership training weekend for them, and then took them for the long walk through Luddingstone, Orpington, you know, circled round. And these were 16, 17, 18-year-olds who had never left Hackney, and I'm talking around 2000, 2001, so not that long ago. And they asked me what animals would they experience. Are there bears? Are there going to be wolves here? And it was a really poignant moment for me, because I thought that I had been like them. You know, I'd lived in Stepney growing up, so I suppose you'd kind of call it, you know, inner city kids. But because I'd had this experience the whole way along of having a taste of the English countryside, it felt really strange that these kids would have no idea what England could offer them. But going back to our experiences as kids there, we had a self-reliance, running around, playing games at Skeet, climbing up into the lofts. And at one point we had a basement down there where we would have a games room. I don't know what we had, I can't remember what we had, pool table, foosball, something like that. It was like being on holiday without your parents, really, because they were having their own fun nearby. It wasn't scary, you know, you knew if you needed help you could shout out and there was an adult, and it didn't matter if it was your parent or not, because all the parents were one. And the other kids that were with us weren't necessarily our friends. We didn't see them the rest of the year. We all lived in different places. We were different ages. But when we came together on those Skeet weekends, we were like a little band of brothers and sisters. Those weekends at Skeet were a real break from the routine, because if you were at home, you had your TV, you had your scheduled activities. I mean, I guess some kids, you know, played football teams, or you know, had swimming lessons at the weekend, or we had cheder, Jewish religious instruction, and this was a step outside of the everyday experience, and I feel like in a lot of ways it was a return to an earlier, simpler life. You know, if the kids were bored, well, pick yourself up and go and find something to do. There wasn't this, you know, the feeling that I think my generation has now as parents, that we need to entertain the kids. If they're bored, we need to find them something to do. At Skeet, there were times when you sat around being bored, but there were times when, you know, you just hung out. There were kids hanging out together. We would just sit and chat, sit outside. We did the campfire, which was great, and just shoot the breeze. And because you weren't with your everyday peer group, you weren't with your school or your youth club or the people that you were normally with, there was an opportunity to explore different ways of thinking about things and different people's life experiences and attitudes towards things that we wouldn't have necessarily had if we'd gone down with a group of kids that all lived locally, we all knew each other and did the same things all the time. So there was it was an opportunity to open your mind and try out something that you might have been too shy to do at home. You might have felt a bit silly, because we were really silly. We did really daft things for fun. And it didn't matter because nobody was judging. Everyone was just there to have a good time. We definitely developed our independence there, because I think when you are at home, even if your parents aren't there, you're still following your parents' rules and living life the way your parents have set it up. But when we were down at ski and we were kind of left to our own devices, you had to be a bit resilient, because you were roaming around fields. Things happen. Kids have accidents. Stupid stuff happens. But you made your own decisions. I mean, unless there was an organised activity going on, no one expected to see you until mealtime, and so we had to get on with each other. And we were a wide range of ages. We were a wide range of personalities, but we would all kind of rub along as a team, and we learnt to find our own ways of doing things. We created our own mischief. We were sharing rooms. We were in dormitories, and especially teenage girls. Sharing dormitories with people they don't know can be a bit of a sticky thing. But I think, when you're in situations where you are kind of confronted with having to do something, having to find a way to make something work, you learn how to do it. And then the next time you're confronted with a situation where you don't know what to do, you've already got that experience of, well, okay, I can. I went on a training weekend with Yogi Mayer, when I was 17 or 18. Yogi did a youth leadership training weekend, and I don't know if he did it in association with any organisation, or if Yogi did it for fun and just sort of word went round, sign up if you want to. But the boys slept in tents on the field, the girls slept in the house, which I think is very reminiscent of the way Yogi ran his weekends when my parents' generation went down to Skates. And we did, all the activities that my parents did with us, Yogi did with us then. I do remember some of the girls sneaking down to the boys' tents, and we managed to stay all night. We got a bit told off in the morning, but, Yogi wasn't that angry with us. I think that schools and youth groups are still looking to take kids to places like that because they recognise the importance of weekends away where kids get a bit of independence. There's a programme, I don't know how many schools are in it, but where I live, called PGL, Parents Get Lost, and they take the kids out to purpose-built places in the country where they will have these kind of weekends away. I think, however, they are very structured because they're run by schools. The youth group ones tend to also be very structured. There doesn't seem to be a lot of free time for the kids to roam around. And a lot of that is because they've got health and safety regulations. They're supervised by, whatever accrediting bodies supervise them. When we went with our parents, everyone just did what they wanted. We did all kinds of things that are probably not very safe. which the kids wouldn't be allowed to do now. But to get out of London, to get out of the normal routine of things, I think it's really, really important.